The Predator simulation hall dimmed until the only light came from the ribbed panels beneath our seats and the thin blue line tracing the ceiling like a horizon. Dozens of cadets, scaled, furred, feathered, or smooth, settled into the amphitheater tiers. A hush moved across the room, the kind that meant nerves were ready to misfire. Instructor Valith Tsar stepped onto the central platform with the unhurried grace of something that had never worried about being eaten. His crest plates lifted in a slow bloom. "Today," he said, voice sibilant, "we study the sounds that rule instinct. The noises that end thought." A few of the Kari twisted their ears back. The Kyellans in the front row folded their lower eyelids like shutters. Only the Zephyr drones stayed perfectly still, masks reflecting the room like polished coins. I sat 3 rows from the back, alone on a bench labeled in neutral glyphs, Human, Audio Range C. The label always made me feel like a radio. Valith gestured. The floor iris opened, and a pillar rose carrying a cluster of speakers and send emitters. The system hummed. "We begin with Vox 1. Recorded on a death world the primates call Earth," Valith said. "Predator designation, Panthera onca. Translated name, Jaguar. Observe your heart response." The hall shuddered with a roar that hit like a physical shove. It wasn't a lion's broadcast thunder, it was shorter, denser, like a boulder trying to grind its way through a throat. 2 Kari flinched so hard their claws clicked against the bench. In the row below me, a Kyellan stiffened and then blinked rapidly to rehydrate her corneas. The Zephyr mask stayed coins. "Heart rates," Valith called. The gauges along the walls pulsed green, then yellow. "Note the sudden spikes," he said, almost bored. "Instinct recognizes pattern. Apex. Ambush." He let the Jaguar roll again, then cut it and switched to Vox 2. Canis lupus. Wolf. Pack ambulation. A prelude to coordinated attack. Howls braided the air, overlapping, staggered, rising from distant to near. The room seemed to lean toward the sound. I felt the old pull, the memory of pine resins and frost under boots, the knowledge that you listen because the land is speaking. A Kari cadet a few seats left of me exhaled a ragged note. He turned, caught me watching, and flicked his ears as if to say, "Mind your own genes, mammal." Valith watched the graphs with pleasant malice. "Adrenal spikes persist across taxa," he said. "So simple, so universal." Vox 3 hit with the long, layered growl of a big cat I knew in my bones. Not the golden plains voice of plains lions. This call had canyon walls in it. Granite and dusk. The end rolled up into a sound my off-world classmates always misheard as a scream. Around the room, seats creaked. The Kyellan rehydration blink turned frantic. 1 Kari, bigger than me by half, pressed his palm to the seat rail like the furniture could stop his legs from running. I laughed. It slipped out like a cough you pretend is a joke, but it was an honest sound. The Cougars call wasn't funny. It was familiar. It sounded like the exact moment a ridgeline goes quiet and you realize the rabbit tracks you've been following just stopped. My laugh landed in the silence like a dropped tool. Valith's head rotated with slow precision. He didn't need to search for the culprit, the hall knew exactly where a human laugh came from. "Cadet Kane," he said. "Translate your reaction for the class." I could feel 50 eyes and at least 8 other sensory organs swivel. I shrugged. "It's a cougar," I said. "They sound worse than they are. You don't run. You make yourself big, stay calm, keep eyes on it, talk steady. 9 times out of 10, it peels off." A Kyellan beside the aisle whispered, "He speaks to it." I shook my head. "You speak to yourself. The cat doesn't care what language fear uses." Valith's crest plates tilted. "You would instruct the academy in survival, cadet?" "No," I said, deadpan. "You're doing fine. I'm just saying, the noise is a bluff and a boundary test. If you collapse, you've already agreed to be food." Several Kari hissed a discomfort trill. Even the Zephyr masks seemed to pick up a faint tremor from their wearers. Valith let silence stretch until it turned into a chord. Earth is classified as high threat, yes, he said softly. But classification may encourage myth. Perhaps you simply romanticize your roots. Maybe, I said. Or maybe we domesticated thunder and decided it was furniture. That earned a few involuntary clicks, Kari laughter's mean cousin. Vailitha's frill lowered by a millimeter. He gestured again. Vox 4 poured out a different sound, deeper, rhythmic, so low you felt it before hearing it. Then another, a wet cough that snapped the air like a short whip. Vailith layered them, building a wall of teeth. Your cardiac response, Cadet Kane, he asked sweetly. I checked the wall graphs. My line had bumped up but held steady. The Kari beside me had spiked to yellow-red and was trying not to show it. Elevated, I said. Not panicking. Explain the difference. Fear tells you something true, I said. Panic tells you a story. A murmur moved across the tiers. Vailith stood very still. Perhaps, then, your species should be assessed under conditions that remove the romance and isolate the truth. There it was, the angle of his tail that meant a challenge had been selected hours ago, waiting for a cue. He extended one claw and tapped the console. The room brightened. The pillar sank. On the far wall, a new slate opened, dome schedule, survival rotations. Empty lines filled with glyphs, one line pulsed in Academy Standard, Dome S, Earth Biozone Trial, Solo, C, Elias Kane, tomorrow's second shift. The hall inhaled as a single throat. Solo, Akari blurted. With a primate? Vailitha's voice slid into polite. Cadet Kane assures us that Earth's apex notices are bluffs. We will test bluff from boundary. He will enter the survival dome configured with Earth biomes. He will endure the soundscape, sense, tactical pressures, and act accordingly. The class will observe. I lifted my hands, palms out. No weapons? Standard survival kit, Vailith said. No ballistic arms. No lethal energy. Tools permitted. Ingenuity encouraged. That last one's generous, I said. A Kyelan raised a fine-boned hand. Instructor, wouldn't a group run produce cleaner data? We are not testing teamwork, Vailith said without looking at her. We are testing claims. I felt the stares shift again, some curious, some delighted, a few predatory in the way gossip is. I forced my shoulders to a knot. My first instinct was always to grin the way you do when you trip and pretend you meant to dance. Any objections, Cadet? Vailith asked. His tone made no sound like a trapdoor. I thought of the message from my sister last week, a short clip of our old ridge with the wind dragging snow sideways, then her face tilted up to the camera, mouth hidden in a scarf, eyes amused. Still know the roads? She'd typed. I'll do it, I said. One request. Vailith waited. Add weather, I said. Predators are scary. Cold is honest. A few more clicks. The Zephyr masks tilted in unison, as if taking a note. Vailitha's frill smoothed into something like satisfaction. We will consider barometric variables. The schedule slate locked. The lights rose fully. Vailith dismissed the class with a flick of his claws. Cadets stood, relief turning into the chatter that follows tension. Did you see his graph? How can a mammal laugh? Earth must be fiction. They brand their fear and sell it as courage. I stayed seated a moment, cataloging the tremor in my hands and deciding not to mock myself for it. Fear tells you something true. It was telling me that tomorrow, under Vailitha's eyes, the line between simulation and humiliation would be thin. The Kari who'd sat near me paused on his way up the aisle. His pupils were vertical slits in amber. Human, he said. If you run, do you die? Depends, I said. On terrain, on what's chasing, on whether it wants you or wants you gone. But mostly, running makes you louder. He considered that, then showed a flash of teeth that might have been respect. Or appetite. Then be quiet tomorrow, he said, and left. I took the long route out, past the ring corridor windows. Vera 9 filled half the sky, a bruise-colored giant crossed with pale storms. The Academy's reflection rode the glass, a faint ghost of spines and spokes. In the corridor's hum, my feet remembered dirt trails, and my nose, dulled by station air, ghosted a hint of resin. Cougars had taught me two things that mattered. First, the land belongs to what listens. Second, you don't need to be the scariest thing out there. You need to make the scariest thing reconsider its schedule. At my birth, I laid out the standard survival kit I'd signed a dozen times without caring: fiber cord, microfilament, collapsible staff, multi-tool, thermal blanket, spark rod, water condenser, 3 adhesive patches for pressure cuts. The staff, at least, had weight. I messaged my sister, got a field exam. Earth biomes. Might be funny. She answered fast, don't be brave. Be stubborn. I smiled, thumb hovering before I typed back, stubbornness is just bravery with receipts. I stretched, then sat on the edge of the bunk and made my mind walk the first hour in the dome. Enter. Inventory. Listen. No grand gestures. Fear would want a stage, I would give it a checklist. I pictured Valitha's crest rising when I laughed. He didn't want me to fail the dome, he wanted me to fail the room, to break the posture of human audacity that embarrasses species who prefer their fear polished and hung on walls. I lay back, hands folded under my skull, and stared at the ribs of the berth ceiling. Tomorrow, they'd pipe in the cats and wolves, bring in the smell of damp bark and old kills, mix heat with shadow, maybe set the rain machine to needle. They'd watch for flinch. They'd wait for the human to convert a laugh into a scream. Relax, I told the empty room. It's just a cougar. The words fell flat in station air, but they steadied something that mattered. The schedule slate on my wall pulsed once, a reminder I didn't need. I shut my eyes and counted my breath down until the numbers lost meaning and the ridge in my head replaced the ceiling with stars. Let them play the sounds. Let them try to rename my memories as threats. In the morning, I would go into their dome, which pretended to be my world, and I would behave as if it truly were. Because the thing about fear and maps is simple: once you've walked a place, the noises change. The dome door shut behind me with a heavy lock, and the sudden absence of mechanical noise was startling. No fans, no station hum, just silence thick enough to make my ears strain. The floor beneath my boots changed from steel to packed soil, the air damp with resin, and the light turned into something filtered through invisible leaves. They'd done a decent job. Not Earth, but close enough to fool the stomach into tightening. Above me, the dome ceiling projected a false sky, pale clouds drifting in slow arcs. The biomes rotated with magnetic partitions. Right now, I stood at the edge of a simulated forest. My survival kit rode my hip and shoulder, light but adequate. The observation deck was hidden, but I knew they were there, hundreds of alien cadets, and Valith with his slow, satisfied frill. They'd be watching my pulse, my heat map, every twitch. I crouched, pinched a handful of dirt, and let it trickle. Too dry for pine country, too loose for cougar slopes. A fabricated forest. That meant scent emitters, not real decay. That meant I'd need to be careful with assumptions. A howl split the air. Hi, lonely, then answered from another quadrant. Wolves. I felt my heart bump in recognition but stayed still. Let the noise pass through. The sound was designed to rattle anyone unused to being prey. I straightened slowly. All right, I muttered to myself, knowing they'd hear through my suit mic. First rule, don't panic. Second rule, don't be interesting. I moved along a slope where the ground dipped into shadow. The simulation provided trunks tall enough to disappear in digital haze, bark rough under my palm. I tested it, real texture on the surface, but no insects beneath. A fake world convincing enough to trick the untrained. Another howl cut in closer. I heard paw steps crunching leaves. My eyes adjusted, and sure enough, 3 wolves emerged, gray forms materializing with uncanny smoothness. Their eyes glowed faintly, too bright, a programmer's touch. I gripped the collapsible staff from my kit and snapped it open. The sound echoed sharp. The wolves halted, ears twitching. I planted my feet, raised the staff chest high, and shouted, "Back off." The first wolf tested with a faint, low growl vibrating the dirt. I stepped forward, swinging the staff against a nearby tree trunk with a crack. The wolves flinched, reevaluating. I didn't give them my back, kept steady. One by one, they slunk into the brush. From somewhere above, faint murmurs traveled. The cadets were talking. They'd expected blood, not theater. I smirked. 9 times out of 10, I said aloud, they peel off. The dome shifted. A wind machine spun, carrying dampness. The tree line thinned into rocks and low scrub. My chest tightened with recognition. Mountain terrain. Perfect hunting ground for cougars. I slowed. The silence grew heavy again, thicker than before. Cougars don't announce themselves. They whisper with absence. I scanned ridges and boulders, searching for shadow that didn't match. A growl snapped like a bowstring from behind me. I spun as the holographic cougar leapt, muscles bunching with terrifying realism. I jammed the staff upward, bracing. The weight slammed into me. Not enough to break bones, but enough to throw me to one knee. Too real, I hissed, pushing. The program had been dialed high. I shoved the staff into its chest, eyes locked with its glowing gold. "You don't get me today." With a snarl, the cougar bounded off and circled. I kept the staff ready, pivoting with it. Cougars wanted the back of the neck. I denied angles, keeping my shoulders squared. My breathing stayed steady. "You're not hunger," I muttered. "Your homework." A rustle from the ridge above, 2 more cougars appeared. My jaw clenched. That wasn't natural. Cougars don't hunt in packs. Valeth was adjusting the simulation. "All right," I said, loud enough for the observers. "Instructor wants a show." The trio spread out, textbook flanking. I bent, grabbed a loose rock, and hurled it at the nearest. It passed through the hologram, but the beast blinked, staggered, like the simulation was forced to interpret impact. That gave me a beat. I used it to climb onto a boulder, back pressed to stone. Now no one could flank. The cougars circled, growling. I slammed the staff against the rock rhythmically, boom, boom, boom. "Come on," I shouted. "Pick your lottery." After a tense standoff, the animals faded into mist, simulation code collapsing them. My breath fogged in the suddenly cooled air. They were testing stress thresholds. I wasn't broken yet. The dome darkened as clouds rolled in overhead. Wind howled, artificial but bitter. Rain machines kicked on, cold needles pricking through the false forest canopy. The ground slicked under my boots. The noise of rain was constant, masking any predator's approach. That was when the bear arrived. It lumbered out of the dark with shoulders that looked like they could roll through buildings. Its roar hit like a shockwave. The observation deck must have been leaning forward, waiting for my pulse to spike red. I didn't run. I couldn't. Running against a bear is suicide. I planted the staff, raised both arms wide, and shouted back. My voice was hoarse against the rain, but I poured everything into it. "No!" The bear halted, snorted, swung its head. Water dripped from its fur. I grabbed the thermal blanket, snapped it open, and held it above me, making my frame larger. The bear blinked, confused by the shifting silhouette. I advanced 1 step, screaming again. "Go!" The beast shifted, uncertain. The rain hissed between us. For 3 eternal seconds, nothing moved. Then the bear grunted, turned, and melted into the digital mist. I lowered the blanket, chest pounding. My breath came rough, but steady. "That's bluff from boundary," I said, mostly to Valeth. "Fear's not a leash. It's a tool." The dome lights flickered. My wristband pulsed a warning. The simulation parameters jumped off scale. Something had been altered. The animals weren't coded to fade anymore. The ground under me trembled with a sound I didn't recognize. A roar deeper than the jaguar, broader than the bear. The walls of the dome pulsed with energy as the program expanded. I froze. This wasn't the standard trial anymore. Someone, Valeth, had sabotaged safety locks. The predators were no longer bound by harmless simulation. The claws looked sharper. The eyes glowed brighter. Above, cadets must have been panicking. They hadn't signed up to watch a death sentence. But I had no time for them. The roar came again, so loud it made my teeth ache. I tightened my grip on the staff, adjusted the blanket, and whispered, "Okay." Round 2. The forest split. Something massive stalked forward, shadows forming into bulk. And the trial was no longer a test. It was survival. The roar didn't fade, it pressed into my chest like a storm surge. The fabricated trees trembled as the dome's projectors strained to keep up with the new parameters. Whatever Valeth had loaded into the system wasn't part of the Academy's official survival curriculum. The thing came forward through flickering shadows. Massive shoulders, claws like hooked knives, jaws wide enough to take me in one bite. It wasn't one Earth predator, it was stitched together from several. A bear's bulk, a cat's speed, the head of something alien. They designed a monster to make sure no one laughed. I braced the staff across my chest. My heart hammered, but I forced my breathing even. "You want a test, Valeth?" I muttered, knowing the deck was listening. "Fine. Let's grade this together." The beast charged. Dirt sprayed from under its paws. I sidestepped, slamming the staff against its muzzle. The impact jolted through my arms. Not enough to stop it, but enough to turn its head. Its claws raked the ground where I'd been a second earlier. I scrambled to higher ground, boots sliding on wet stone. The rain program hadn't been shut off, it sheeted down, stinging my face and making every surface slick. The predator prowled below, eyes glowing amber in the artificial storm. From the observation deck came faint noise, cadets arguing, panicked. Someone must have realized the safeguards were off. But no one could step in now. The dome was sealed until the program ended, or until I ended. I forced myself to think. Fear tells you something true. Panic tells you a story. The truth was clear, I couldn't match that thing in strength. But predators bleed patience before they bleed flesh. If I made it work for the kill, it might slip. The kit rattled at my belt. Spark rod. Cord. Blanket. Enough to make trouble. I wedged the staff between rocks, yanked cord from the kit, and began rigging a crude snare. My fingers shook, but I pulled the knots tight. The creature's roar rolled again, closer. It lunged uphill, dirt and rain spraying. I ducked aside, drawing it over the cord stretched low between two rocks. The beast hit the line, stumbled, and crashed into the slope with a bone-vibrating thud. The deck gasped loud enough to carry through the dome's acoustics. I didn't waste the moment. I snapped the spark rod, lit the thermal blanket's edge, and shoved it into dry brush near the ridge. Fire hissed to life, rain dampening but not killing it. Smoke rose fast, acrid and thick. The predator regained its footing, snarling. It hated the fire. Its eyes flicked between me and the flames, uncertain. I stood tall, arms wide, staff ready. "Come on," I shouted through the storm. "You want me, burn it." The creature circled, hackles raised, but it hesitated. Fire, height, and noise, three things predators reconsider. I made myself part of that fire, yelling loud enough to echo. My voice cracked, but I kept going. Above, silence replaced the cadets' chatter. They were watching something they'd never seen, a human facing terror without retreat. The beast roared and lunged anyway. Its claws caught my shoulder, ripping fabric, pain lancing hot. I slammed the staff into its jaw, wood shuddering but holding. My back hit the rocks. The predator's breath was hot and foul. Teeth snapped inches from my face. I shoved hard, screaming raw, not fear but defiance. The staff jammed into its throat. Sparks from the fire swirled in the rain. For one frozen instant, predator and prey stared at each other, and the lines blurred. The creature recoiled, choking on smoke, snarling at flame. It stepped back, uncertain. I laughed then, loud, ragged, but real. The sound startled even me. The cadets above must have heard it clear as thunder. The predator blinked, shook itself, and finally backed into mist. The dome's systems glitched, the monster unraveling into fragments of code that dissolved like ash in the rain. The storm died with it. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. My staff hung loose in my hands. My shoulder bled through torn cloth, warm against cold rain. But I was still standing. The dome lights brightened. The door at the far side hissed open. Trial complete. I walked out steady, refusing to limp. The observation deck loomed above the exit corridor, lined with glass. Faces pressed close, scaled, feathered, masked, all watching the human who hadn't broken. Some eyes wide with awe, others with unease. Instructor Valeth stood at the center, crest lowered but eyes burning. I stopped beneath him, lifted my bloodied staff, and tapped it once against the floor. The sound echoed sharp in the quiet. Next time, I said, voice carrying, maybe throw in something scary. Because on Earth? That was just Tuesday. Gasps rippled through the deck. A few cadets clicked laughter. Others turned to whisper fast, too fast to hide. I met Valeth's gaze. His frill twitched, then stilled. He said nothing. The corridor doors opened behind me. Medics waited, but I waved them off. Pain was real, but so was the look in those alien eyes. For the first time since arriving at the academy, they didn't see prey. They saw something that had laughed at fear and survived. I stepped into the hall, shoulders squared, the sound of my boots steady. The dome door sealed behind me with a final hiss. Fear tells you something true. Today it told me this: the galaxy had learned a new truth about humans. We weren't prey. We were the thing that makes predators reconsider their schedule.